to welcome BK Fulton to what we call What's Next Virginia on Virginia Free TV, where it's a series of conversations we've had with a number of people around the Commonwealth to dive a little deeper, have a little bit more intimate conversation now that we have this time in our culture, this time in our history where we're basically locked up and locked in. It's also a time to engage. And thankfully we have that opportunity. And BK, you've always been an inspiration to me since the time I've known you. I always, as I told you before, I feel completely underutilized when I'm around you. You're quite an accomplished man. Not only were you a corporate executive of a very high level, but now you've gone into this new realm, I don't even want to call it retirement, in which you have created your own company, Soulidifly Productions, and you're making films to tell a story. Tell us about that.
Sure. I had the privilege of running Verizon Virginia, Verizon West Virginia, the Mid-Atlantic region for Verizon. So at one point had about 44,000 employees, and it was really a great place to spend a fair part of my professional career. I've also worked at other companies, Time Warner, AOL, worked for the Department of Commerce for a little while, worked at a civil rights organization called the National Urban League. And so we're all an aggregate of our experiences. And so for me, when I retired in 2015, the question was, I was still a relatively young man, and I hadn't decided what I would do next. There are a lot of teachers in my family and preachers, so I thought maybe I'd do something ecumenical or in the classroom, talk with a couple of university presidents about doing a faculty thing. And then I talked to my kids and looked at some of my friends' kids, and a lot of them were on these screens, the stuff that I helped to create, to proliferate anyway, the telephone and video games and things like that. So I was like, oh, wait a minute. People aren't going to church like I had to when I was a kid. Education doesn't feel like it's changed as much. Politics have become a little bit polarized, or a lot polarized in many instances. Where is a place where I can make an impact? And it was in art, in media. It was a place where I could touch hearts and touch minds, and realize that we're in this kind of celebrity culture, and I could influence the influencer by paying for the script or writing the script. And so Soulidifly Productions was born. We have the odd footnote in history now of being the first independent-owned film company that produced 4 feature-length films in its first year. Nobody had done that before. Our first film had Taye Diggs, John Cusack, George Lopez, and Luke Hemsworth.
Wow.
And opened in theaters. And people were like, BK, that was your first film? I was like, yeah, we did pretty well with that one. And now we've got our 5th film already released. We have 1, 2, maybe 3 more coming out this year. We also did, I wrote 7 books last year. We released 8 children's books. We are in a 2nd year of our magazine. We focus on positive stories. We've had Quincy Jones in it, Stevie Wonder, the co-founder of Netflix. So that's been fun. And we also have a TV network called SoulVision.tv. So this whole kind of media conglomerate is designed to tell stories from a positive lens. One of the things that frustrated me a lot when we were talking before the session, we talked a little bit about education. One of the things that frustrated me a lot when I was in college and coming up in high school even, was that when women and minorities got to tell their stories, they were often told from this prism of sorrows. So the hurt of our experience, be it slavery stories or domestic violence stories, or
when my head ducks down, I'm taking notes. Notes.
Okay.
That's very interesting. You say the theme of sorrow. That stuns me.
Right. Or stories about, boys in the hood and all this unfortunate stuff. We Pookie got shot, and I didn't want to shoot Pookie anymore. I was going to give Pookie a break and tell stories about inventions and creation and aspirations, things that changed my life at Virginia Tech. Because what I didn't say when I was talking about the college years was that my first couple of years at college, it was a new place for me. I spent a lot of time playing ball and dancing and hanging out. and not as much time as I should have with my books. And so things weren't going quite so well. And I ended up going to the library to plan my escape from Virginia Tech. And I feel it was divine, but I ended up in the E185.5 section of the Dewey Decimal System. And that happens to be the section on Black people. And I started reading about the first open heart surgery and blood plasma and the invention of the third rail by Granville T. Woods, who sold the patent to General Electric in 1901. So I'm in engineering school and knew none of this. So I was like, wait a minute, I can make it here. I belong here. And I went from the probations list to the dean's list to the board of directors of Virginia Tech. And I said, if reading about accomplishments and success can turn my life around 180 degrees, then what would happen if I put it on the big screen and I added powerful music and great acting and great storytelling? And so then I realized, oh my God, we're missing out. Instead of telling stories from the sorrows of our experience, the world needs to see these stories from the achievement narrative. Right. And so Soulidifly really focuses on the achievement narrative.
And that's a pivot in our culture, isn't it?
It is.
To take that theme that became obvious to you. It's like, wait a second, we're not telling the real story here. We're telling a story. Our son, our oldest son, who's now 24, one night we're on the back porch with all the kids, and we're going, what would you like? And we went, if you could do one thing in this world, what would it be? And then the one girl said, I'd like a self-flushing toilet. I said, Dad wouldn't yell at me. She was like 6 or 7 at the time. And everyone broke up and we're all laughing, right? And the oldest son goes, very thoughtful kid. He goes, I'd like to have my own news service where I just put out nothing but positive good news. This is like 15 years ago, BK. So the theme really resonates with me because my own kids feel this same emptiness when it comes to what's really going on in the world, and what could be going on in the world is a light to educate people. So bravo to you.
Well, I appreciate it. I mean, what ends up happening when we shift the conversation to the possibilities is you ignite the creative portion that's in all of us. I think that all of us, I wrote an article not too long ago called The Divine Puzzle of Life from a native son of Virginia. And it talks about each of us bringing the best version of ourselves to the problems of the world. And we can actually solve them. And to be that most useful piece of the divine puzzle, you have to know who you are. You have to know who you are in the world to know what you must do in the world. But when you bring your piece and I bring my piece and the audience members bring their piece, we have a chance at creating love. That's what it comes down to for me now at this age. What I want to pass on is a legacy of love, a legacy of contributions and things that add to the human story. Right. We're at an unusual moment in time where young people are rising up. We're stuck at home. We're taking in content. We're reading books. We're doing Zoom sessions. We're What's Next Virginia. We have an opportunity to imagine what's next together. And to do that, we've got to get over some of these issues that have held us back for hundreds of years. We are still talking about race in America. We are still talking about equality and fairness. We are still teaching some of the same nonsense we taught 100 years ago. And we've really just got to move forward. And we can learn from the past, and as well we should, but we have to be deliberate about inventing the tomorrow we want for our children and our children's children.
Did you say this is your retirement life or your post corporate life? Did you have that same philosophy or outlook or dailiness about your professional life? That's a different mindset. When you get up and every day you can choose to do those things. You're not fortunate. You're an achiever. You've accomplished a lot and you're giving back. Congratulations. But to achieve, you had to work and get in that dailiness that grinds people down, that they can't look up and see that light that you have become and are shining out even in the board behind you there, the screen behind you, the Northern Lights, you know, you're becoming a light. Was there a moment in your life, like the Dewey Decimal day, when you were like, oh, this is a moment for me? You hit like Paul, you know, Saul on the road to Tarsus. Did you hit your knees and say, this is what I have to do with my life?
When I knew what I had to do in school, I wasn't sure what I was going to do in life. So once I started reading those achievement narratives and I developed this confidence in myself that I could succeed at Virginia Tech, that definitely spilled over into the next sets of experiences. So for example, after I finished at Tech, the summer I spent at the Kennedy School at Harvard, and I literally packed my car in Blacksburg, Virginia to drive to Cambridge. And I was a little nervous. I had never been to Harvard before. Nobody in my family had been there. I was expecting to see these kids with these big heads and thick glasses, you know, spouting the theory of relativity at a moment's notice. And I got there and it was just regular people. I mean, they were smart, but so were people at Virginia Tech. And so then I realized, oh my God, I've been fooling myself. I can exist here. I can do this work too. And so, you know, confidence is an amazing thing. And if you have confidence, you take on some challenges, big and small. And so for me, then when I got into the corporate world, I brought that confidence with me. When you're in a big company like Verizon, where the data is what drives decisions, as opposed to personalities or titles, then you hone in on the data to create solutions for customers. And so there, I wasn't thinking as much about how I might use my gifts, my talents, my interests to change the world. So I think that's the pivot. So now, post-retirement, where the basic necessities are cared for, I found my soulmate, so I'm happy. So now I'm at a place where, you know, what's my contribution back to civil society? And I think it was after I finished the work at Verizon that I realized that I wasn't done yet. And so I think, like I said, I studied a bit before choosing to create a media company, because I wanted to make sure that what I did had impact and was lasting.
Well, it sounds like you're recreating or retelling or telling the achievement narratives. I mean, that's that which drove you to your best self. You're telling to a broader, deeper audience, and on a level that they can absorb.
Absolutely.
Is that what I'm hearing? Is that fair?
That's absolutely fair. And then some people ask me, is it just aimed at Black people or minorities? And I say it's aimed at everybody. Because in the same way that I was robbed as a high school student, an elementary student, of that narrative, people that are not from my community or weren't from my community or who are not Black or anybody, white people, Asian people, Native American people,
right?
They were not privy to those accomplishments either. So we all grew up in this soup of a particular kind of education that spoke about the contributions of white people in particular. And it really underplayed the contributions of women and minorities. And so you can begin to see how people might believe that one group has certain talents and one group has another talent, when the truth is, you know, talent is randomly distributed throughout our species, and any one among us may have the cure for ALS or the cure for cancer or the cure for Alzheimer's. And so if we're smart, you invest in everybody. You don't just try to pick winners or losers.
Right.
If you invest in everybody in our country and make sure that every young lady and every young man has what they need to be the best version of themselves, guess what? We all win.
Oh, yeah.
We all win.
It's a lot easier when people are productive and trying to produce something that's based on their own natural abilities and talents, and it's accelerated. I remember, to your point about the achievement narrative, my grandmother, on my maternal grandmother, big baseball fan, and she lived in Pittsburgh. That's where my family is on both sides of the aisle. She was a huge Roberto Clemente fan. I was born in 65 and Clementi died in 72. So it wasn't like I had experienced a lot of Roberto Clemente film in my days. And clearly he wasn't on in Detroit where I grew up at the time. But she would always say to me, "That's a great man." And it always moved me that I would say, "Yeah, he's a great ball player." And she'd say, "No, he's an even better person." And so because she set the frame of this is what success looks like for being a good person, he was my childhood hero growing up because my grandmother set it in place. Yeah. The narrative she described for me, because I adored her, I was like, well, I'm going to try to be like Roberto Clemente. Yeah. And tell me more about him. So, and it's so important, especially for children, to have that person or that lodestar, that something to shoot for, that sets this is accepted, one, it is good, and it will be, supported to move forward successfully and happily in life.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on the board of a group called Media Mentors, and a number of people from around the state, and we're trying to kind of cultivate the next generation of young media creators. So we help them to create documentaries and to tell their own stories. One of the advisors is a famous artist, and we had our first board meeting, and he was sharing what motivated him to get involved with media. Most people can appreciate that media is one of the most powerful tools ever created. It's in your house. We check it out at the cinema when they're open. We have it on our phones. It's very powerful, and it shapes points of view. And so he was representing the state in a foreign country, and he was a delegate, literally. And so he noticed that the host would look at him odd from time to time at the early parts of dinner. And at some point, she came to him and she said, I've listened to you tonight and I owe you an apology. And he was like, you owe me an apology? What for? She was like, because I was afraid to have you in my house and afraid to have you around my children because of what I saw about people that look like you on TV and in movies.
Wow.
She didn't know this man from Adam. And so, but the image she framed of everybody that looked like him came from TV and movies. Mm-hmm. And so he said that from that day to this, he has made sure that he is involved in things to make sure that we inform the narrative. Because what happens when people who don't know your experience or don't know your community tell your story, by design, they tell it from their point of view. And if we've all been poisoned by a biased education or an incomplete narrative, then it's just hard for people to see something different. I mean, do you know how many conversations I've been in where, I was president of the phone company and people would, well, so what did you do at the phone company? I was president of the phone company. So what did you do? Well, I did what the president does. I mean, because they can't get it in their head. So like, who'd you work for? Well, I mean, we have a board of directors and that sort of thing, but I was kind of the head guy. And it's just really hard because their education, their worldview doesn't tell them that guys that look like me do those sorts of things. And if you keep a certain line of thinking going long enough, people begin to believe it and they pass it on. Thank goodness for your mom and your family who told you Roberto Clemente was a good man. So you started off, or at least you had counter information to whatever you might have been getting otherwise that said, hey, this is a good guy. He's okay to follow. And we need a lot more of that. One of the things when people ask me some of these questions and they tell me, well, how do you get more people to think like that? Do we need a reconciliation committee and all this? I'm like, nah, I mean, it doesn't have to be that hard. I'm like, do something you love with someone who's different than you. The simpleness of doing the thing you love with someone that's different from you means that you're probably going to have some fun, whether you end up liking each other or not. But invariably, because human beings are more alike than different, invariably you will start a conversation. And then you'll get to trust each other. and you'll ask questions. I remember, so Steve Kaysen was my first roommate at Virginia Tech, happened to be a white guy. We're the best of friends to this day. And I remember he asked me, he's like, BK, why do you put that grease in your hair? He said, I'm trying to wash the grease out of mine. If I don't, it's gonna look like dog hair. And we started laughing. And I was like, well, my hair gets dry. And if I don't put a little oil or something in it, it'll get brittle and break up. He's like, oh, well, mine gets oily. And if I don't wash it every day, it'll get really greasy and nasty. And so we started having these honest conversations and we'd laugh out loud about stuff. And so he stopped becoming a white guy and he was my roommate and we looked out for each other. And I stopped being a black guy to him and I was his roommate and he looked out for me. And I think the simplicity of that interaction can become what more of us experience. I'm writing a book. Well, actually, I just finished the book a few days ago, and it should get published in August to commemorate the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And it's called The Tale of a T. And the co-author is a Jewish...
T-E-A?
T-E-E. The Tale of the T, golf tee. So a lot of people don't know that it was an African-American guy, Dr. George Grant, who invented the golf tee. And he also was the first African-American professor at Harvard, and also was a doctor. So talking about so people having to do so much, it's kind of par for the course for brothers. We got to do a lot of things out there in the world, but that's okay. And so the co-writer, Jonathan Blank, we started emailing each other. He had saw where my wife, Jackie Stone, had helped to clean off a sign that was defaced during some of the protests, and the sign for Oliver Hill. And it ended up in the paper. So he wrote her and said what a great thing she did. We were on vacation in South Carolina. And so then she said, oh, well, you should see BK's speech he gave at VCU and his movie that's out now, One Angry Black Man. And so he said, oh my God, I love the speech. BK, I'm gonna watch the movie. And we started this dialogue over the course of a few days. And the notes were so honest and so genuine that we actually captured them for a book. And so the book will be out in August. But it's, again, just the power of conversation between people who may be a little different. But what you find out, we both came to the same conclusion that the truth will set us free.
Powerful statement. And you're telling a story. And that's one of the most, life is a series of stories. And they're very impactful. And I remember one as a kid growing up was on the show MASH, the TV show MASH. There was one wounded GI who didn't want the wrong blood, right? I don't know if you remember that scene, remember that episode. And they joked with him and they painted his face and he said, did you give me the wrong blood? And they said, it's all the same. Oh, and by the way, the guy who invented plasma to separate blood that saved your life is a black doctor named Charles Drew.
Right.
And that was powerful because it made it personal, but it wasn't punishing, so telling these stories, I think, is incredibly important. And I guess before we jump off into the other issues here, I'm curious as to how you make a film. What does a producer of a film have to do to tell the story? That just seems like an inordinate amount of work, and you pulled off 4 in the last year.
4 in our first year. We've got and we got 12 in the can, so we're cranking. But making a film is a challenging proposition. You need a script, so a story. You need a director. You need a cinematographer, and you need actors and all the supporting cast, from craft services to camera crew, second teams, and a little bit of money. And you pull it together, and then you capture it, and then you edit it, and then you do reshoots if you missed something or something didn't quite work out. And then you need to find a distributor, and hopefully it'll get seen. The economics of the film business are daunting. So in any given year, about 8,000 to 10,000 films are made. Approximately 2 to 4% actually get seen. our company is experiencing
That's
180
I
degree.
got to back that up. I got to back up the tape on that one, so to speak here.
Okay.
10,000 made a year.
A year.
2 to 4% are seen.
Yeah, 2 to 4% get distribution deals.
So
most films that get
the
made.
economics of that, of getting that product to market, what does it cost, and how much do you have to raise initially to produce it under the 2 to 4% chance you're going to get distribution on it?
You figure, you're in $1 million per film. There's some independents that can do them for less, but the production quality tends to show it, and those are among the ones that don't get distribution. And we're not counting the shorter films. I mean, most people define a major motion picture as at least 85 minutes. So the shorter, if we added the shorter films and the stuff people do on their phones and things, we're in the hundreds of thousands of potential assets. But so our experience has been that all of our films have gotten distribution, every single one. And worldwide deals, many in theatrical releases. We've worked with Lionsgate. We've worked with Byron Allen's Freestyle Media. They have our current film. We've worked with Gravitas Ventures, the largest distributor of independent films. And I think, so what has contributed to that is being a businessman and knowing how to manage assets and people and making sure that there's an end in view before we even start any of the principal photography. The other secret sauce for us has been identifying really talented people and making them part of the team and incentivizing them with equity in the business. So Monty Ross, who helped Spike Lee to found 40 Acres and a Mule, is on the team. We brought him to Richmond. Keon Martin, who understudied under Martin Scorsese and Joel Schumacher, is on the team. We brought him to Richmond. The person who shot the 13th for Ava DuVernay was our cinematographer on One Angry Black Man and Love.com, which is currently on Netflix. So we bring in people with talent and build around them great stories and provide the necessary resources to get the project done. And it's a little bit of magic to get it over the finish line, but we've been able to do it consistently so far.
An extraordinary level of accomplishment. It sounds like, no secret sauce here, more talent, better production, higher quality, more likelihood of distribution. Is that fair?
That's very fair.
And so, it's just curious because I love business models. The business model of a streaming video is based on what they'll pay you in per views, or how does that work? Or can you say?
Well, there are 5 standard sales channels for film. So we're doing feature film. So it's not just streaming. In today's world, with the theaters closed, we are streaming our film in over almost 100 movie theaters. But theatrical is the first window. Then transactional video on demand, so all your cable networks, services where you rent film. Then subscription video on demand, so that's your Netflix, your HBO, your Showtime, Stars, things like that, where people subscribe and watch content. Then your TV vertical, and then kind of streaming and other ancillary. So those are the 5 sales channels. And then for each one, there's a different economic model. Typically, you make it available to audiences and they choose it or they don't choose it. And so it's a one-off. For the Netflix of the world, they pay a certain fee for the film depending on how it performed in the other channel. And for TV, they do the same. And for theatrical, you put it in and people go or they don't go. You see the numbers ramp up on the weekend. So we haven't on the One Angry Black Man, we weren't able to put that in physical space theater because of COVID-19. And we'll see if the theaters are open. We're about to release a film called Freedom's Path in the 4th quarter. And then we'll release 2 more films before that, probably September. One called The Unity Ride, It's a fun film about a Republican and a Democrat who take a bicycle ride together from New Orleans to Canada. It's funny, but it's designed to talk about what happens when you do something you love together. And then Joseph, which is an Afro-Caribbean film about appreciating your roots. And those two will come out in the next 60 to 90 days.
That's exciting. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing at least one Angry Black Man, hearing great reviews on it so far. You must be pleased.
I am very pleased. I mean, when a Pulitzer Prize finalist film critic says, your film's a 3 out of 4, and that's at the Boston Globe. And then the Boston Herald said that it was the most important film released that week. And so that's pretty heady stuff for a little film company out of Richmond. Nobody expected that, and that's cool. I don't mind being the underdog. I mean, at the end of the day, quality work is quality work. And that particular film is an opportunity to look into one of these conversations on race, class, and culture. And you can participate or not. Every ethnicity is represented, every gender, every orientation, and it's honest. And what I love about the film is its honesty. And I think that's what people are gravitating towards. It won the Oscar Michaud Award. It usually came in first, second, or third in film festivals. People are telling me, especially people that are a little bit older, tell me how much they enjoy it, and it's helping them to start conversations with people they hadn't thought about talking to, and also to read the books in the film, because the film names a few books from great writers, and so it makes people curious. And at the end of the day, being curious, reading more, learning more, stepping outside of that comfort zone a little bit is medicine for the soul.
Well, that's fantastic. Look forward to seeing that. And to get both Boston papers to say something nice is pretty amazing, because they have different views of the world. But let's talk about race, class, and culture. We're in a moment here in America, aren't we? We have, and I think that the moment might be escaping us from and I don't call it the death of George Floyd, I call it the killing. And it was an awareness and brought everyone to the fore when we were suddenly struck with this. That is terribly, terribly wrong. We can't understand that. And the resulting reaction has been, I think, not what America would have hoped since May 25th, 26th, when Mr. Floyd was killed. Where can we go forward? You're a solutions guy. What solutions can we look for? What does victory look like? What does a first good step look like?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought this up. So I'm really proud of the young people for getting out and protesting in a way that was mostly peaceful. There were some challenges, but not to focus on that, to focus on the idea that it was intergenerational, multi-ethnic, many people, and a lot more white people than were in some of the early days of some of the earlier civil unrest in the 60s. It gives me hope. I worked in civil rights. I was called in when LA blew up after the Rodney King beating, and the president went to Los Angeles. A team of us from the National Urban League went there to help the Los Angeles Urban League. And I saw firsthand the results of people frustrated and angry. I didn't think I'd see that again in my lifetime. And then to have it happening with Richmond being one of the epicenters in many respects because of the monuments and things. So I was proud of the young people for doing what they know how to do. We still have to pull the levers of policy to make meaningful change. The killing of George Floyd and other innocents represent part of what we need to correct. There needs to be accountability in schools, in economics, in politics. And I think that what success looks like is where I'm not worried about my kids when they go out and they're driving a car and they may get stopped by an officer, where somebody I don't know can go to a polling place and vote their opinion, whatever that opinion may be. Success looks like I can go to a job and have an interview, or my children, and they're not discriminated against. A woman can go for a job and be paid equal pay with her male counterparts and her white male counterpart. So success looks more like equity, parity. It's a basic thing, but it's still a thing that we're chasing. And I think you're right. These killings, this odd time with the pandemic and us being at home and everybody seeing this stuff through technology, it has created a rare moment where we get to shape the world that we want to shape for our children. And they're a part of it. And, freedom isn't free. We have to work towards it. We have to all work on it. And I think society, America is big enough for all of us. If you take a view that it's just this little pie, so I've got to take from you if I want to have, or you got to take from me if you want to have, then we're going to clash until we're no longer here. I don't want that for my kids. I don't want that for people that you love. What I want for our nation is for us to use the best of America for all of America.
Right.
And, if my kids aren't safe, yours aren't safe. If your kids aren't getting, good care, my kids likely won't get good care. I want America to mean that we're looking out for each other. Because again, those cures I was talking about, if we underinvest in any group, we unwittingly underinvest in our ability as a nation to compete with the world. We underinvest in our ability to solve the very problems that we need to solve. If we spend too much time on this race stuff, it is a poison that grows. It is a virus in and of itself. And we've got to figure out how to undo the poison of racism. To not know is one thing, and I get that. People don't know all the things that we've learned at our 50 plus. But there are some people who are unwilling to know, and that's part of the sickness, and that's part of what we have to fix. We live in an era now where data is at our fingertips. You can find out what happened in any era of this society. You can talk to almost anyone in the world. And so not knowing or being unwilling to know is not acceptable any longer. It's an excuse. We don't have to operate out of ignorance, out of fear, out of presuppositions about who we are. So the simple way to say it, do something you love with somebody different. It's that simple.
You said earlier, data drives decisions. Is there a way to put data on a dashboard that says we're getting better or we're getting worse? I mean, how do we know? It's because I think the unwillingness by some to not know, they rest in their comfort. They don't have to. It's easier not to. I believe what you said in our pre-call, willful unknowing.
Yes, you have to undo willful unknowing. Yeah.
Willful unknowing. That's a powerful phrase. I love that. And because when you show something show something in their face, and they go, "Hey, look," they're going to naturally recoil. And by doing it through your storytelling, that's a powerful medium, obviously. But getting to that data that is really colorless. I mean, data is just colorless. There's nothing there. It's just like, look, it's either 75 or 25, 32 or 68. It's just a number that you kind of go, how do you get to, if you're at 32, how do you get to 64?
Right. Well, I think, so what you do is you look at the things we've traditionally looked at and you see how we're doing. So how how's the U.S. comparing to other nations in certain categories around education or math or science or whatever? How are particular communities doing in terms of finishing high school, going to college, getting graduate or advanced degrees? And it's there. I mean, we've known for a while the effect of policies. And so where we see communities not doing as well as they should, we put resources there. What we've done historically is, as long as the favored community is doing well, we can let the other one slide. And then we come up with the narrative that says, oh, well, they're lazy, or, oh, they didn't work as hard. Or we make up things to fit the story or to fit the data. When the truth is, a normal brain is enough, and most people can achieve at sufficient levels to take care of themselves and their families. And if we invest in people a little bit, they tend to go a long ways. I mean, so a lot of people don't know this. So the light bulb was invented by, of course, Thomas Edison. What people don't know is that the filament for the light bulb, the thing that gives it its incandescence, the thing that actually lights, was invented by a black guy named Lewis Latimer, who worked with Thomas Edison. And so you don't get that part often in history. What people also don't know is that they're from Virginia, and his parents were escaped enslaved people who went north to have a better life for their children. And so here's a person that wasn't supposed to read, inventing the very thing that many of us use to read every day, And so again, people, we would want to make him exceptional. So what people used to do with me is say, oh, well, BK's special. He's really just really smart and blah, blah, blah. Look, I played ball. I almost flunked out of school. I don't treat myself as any more special than anyone else. Yes, I work very hard. Yes, I spend the time and I do the work. But at the end of the day, my hypothesis is that anybody who spends the time and does the work can get the reward. And so all that to say, let's invest more in our communities, but all of them. We can't accept one group doing well and another group not doing so well. We can't accept, I pay women this much for this job and men this much for this job. We just have to cut it out. I mean, we can stop it, but there's people that benefit from it, and we allow it to go on. And I think the moment that we're in right now, with young people saying enough is enough, is that we can fix a lot of this stuff and fix it without a whole bunch of committees and a bunch of heeing and hawing and taking, 6-7 years dragging our feet to implement change. I mean, back when Brown versus Board was passed in 54, I think it was, there was a deliberate resistance against integration. I mean, if you were in Richmond, thank God for Judge Merritt. But at the end of the day, people made choices. And so then the next generations have to live with those choices. So things that are set up, rules that are made in 50s and 60s go on to affect us in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, et cetera. So we are living, our neighborhoods are shaped because of what was done in the 30s. Wealth is shaped by what was done hundreds of years ago. Opportunities are shaped by policy that's put in place, decades earlier. And so what we have an opportunity to do is shape the environment that our young people, our kids will live in for 50 years, 100 years from now. And I think that I believe that if we can get people to understand that all of us are capable, all of us are important to this divine puzzle of life, all of us need to be the best version of ourselves, then we can create something that we can be proud of, and we all can be proud of. And it's not about your team and my team, his team or her team. We're all on the same team. We're all cousins trying to find our way home. We're all just human beings sharing the same rock called Earth.
I think Governor Beliles, when he met with Virginia Free's board of directors, we were beginning a Virginia way forward. What do we want Virginia to be going forward? He said, you have to agree to the problem before you can do that, and then agree to the data, and then agree to the solutions. And we don't seem to be able to do that in rhythm in this country. We have a House and a Senate just taking up the killing of George Floyd and obvious police reforms that people agree to, and still nothing. Still nothing. And there's universal agreement on 70% of this, and nothing gets done. And I believe, I'm a cynic, I was in the legislature, I think people do it to not get things done. I think there's an intentionality to not achieve policy changes.
Yeah, well, and that happens, and they're absolutely, it's not new, it's historic. I mean, some people ask me about the monuments for a second, and so I said, well, there's a tradition of monument removal in our country. I mean, so today, Chris, today, in 1776, soldiers and citizens removed a statue of King George III. It was in New York. So you know where the bull is on Wall Street?
Yeah.
Yeah, so at that exact site, it used to be this big gold statue of King George III. And on July 9, 1776, some citizens pulled it down. And they decided that enough was enough. So I'm not surprised that a lot of things have been happening. There's the symbols of, Confederacy, what people deem as hatred or what have you, whatever. So the people out in the streets have made choices, and the leadership has now made choices. But our elected officials not moving stuff along is in part influenced by their politics and what they believe to be true. Do they see the pie as big enough for all of us, or is it scarcity? Are they protecting something or building something? And so we have to exercise our right to vote and to put in leaders who will move us forward. And that's the work of civil society. I mean, I think that what we often see from people who consider the pie as finite, that there's only enough room for this group or that group, they do things to shift the way people vote or the way people engage with systems. I think people that are more optimistic about the pie, they want to encourage more people to participate, and they want to encourage more action. So I think, I tend to be in the camp that says, let's have more people to participate. The founding fathers set up a democracy that was built based on the right of participation and representative democracy. And I think that was wise, and it changes with the population. But people in power don't want to give up that power. And then if the people in power have a biased education or a biased point of view, then the decisions they make with that power are informed by that bias. And I mean, a simple lesson is don't add more bias. Okay.
And we mentioned this on the pre-call, and I guessed King George. I didn't guess at the time. I was like, it's probably King George would make sense. So, but you said stop adding to the bias. What did you mean by that? And what do you mean by that?
I mean that if we don't read more and get more informed about what's happened in our history, especially when it's been bias against women, minorities, people of color, then our policies and rules will be designed to penalize, they will be designed to constrain, they will be designed to put upon or to control. And so it's taking a biased lens and creating policy. So that's adding more bias.
Okay.
Yeah. So what we have to do is roll that back and create more policy that creates opportunity. So say, for example, if we know that getting a high school diploma and going to college is, allows a person or increases the likelihood of a person contributing back to society, paying more taxes, et cetera, then it's not a leap to say, let's figure out ways to incentivize going to school. What we tend to do is cut back on student loans, cut back on early child reading programs, cut back on some of the medicine that would make somebody a more productive citizen, especially after all the people we care about get what they need. And so then you're using the system for more bias, almost sinister kind of reasons someone might argue. At the end of the day, I think you have a lot of well-meaning people operating with a worldview that is misinformed. And then they come to the table and they, fight it out. And sometimes we get good policy, sometimes we don't. I applaud our General Assembly here in Virginia when they work together for good. And I'm not against, tapping them on the shoulder or plucking them on the ear when they don't do good sometimes. But we try to get it right.
How do you do that, and how do you recommend others do that? Do you recommend a phone call, a little text, say, we can do better than this. Let's not lose our focus on the better and the more perfect.
Right. Well, you got to speak up. I count many of the members of our legislature as friends. And so I talk to them and they may talk to me and we may kind of share a point of view. And fortunately, because we're friends, we can do it over a meal, or we can do it in a way that doesn't feel threatening. I'm not one to push an agenda on anyone, and I'm not one that allows anybody to push one on me. That said, I know I have an unusual access to some of these leaders, and not everybody does, but I think participating, so voting is a natural, attending your school board meetings, attending council meetings. You have to show up, and then we have to help people to figure out how to use the power in government in particular to make sure that things are fair, things are equitable. It takes work. It is no short-term solution. It is no easy thing, especially when you start talking about making rules. Sometimes it can take decades, and often it does take decades to sufficiently change rules. But what you can do tonight is reach out to a friend who's not exactly like you, and someone who likes to do the things that you do, whether it's riding a bike, going fishing, going to the range, whatever it is that you like to do, and starting the conversation. There's a great book by a woman named Carol Anderson called White Rage. So for some of my white friends who said, hey, I want to understand more about some of the things you've talked about when you've talked about our history and many of the challenges in it. And so that book has been one of the more enlightening, because when she's a professor, the way she lays it out is the facts, it's the data, you do with it what you will, but she just lays it out. It's called White Rage. It's really good. If people don't want to read, then they can watch An Uncomfortable Truth by Liko Mulholland, and also After Selma. Both of those videos are available on our TV network, and you can get to them for free. And those are particularly good. It's a documentary, and it's a white guy, and he's telling his family story in one, and then revisiting the young lady who was one of, if not the youngest person, marching across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and her perspective from as a child and then now as an adult, and what she's seen in Selma and some of the lessons. It's particularly moving, those two. But if someone wants to get kind of an education in a way that they've never had before, those three resources will really be illuminating.
Okay, great stuff. The part about doing something you love with someone different than you, how do you start that? If it's not if it's not a natural part of your day, kind of like, I'm going to call up my black friend and I'm going to go ask him to go do X, Y, and Z. Is that something that's accepted? I mean, would that be received well, or is it just worth a shot?
I think it's just worth the shot. I mean,
that sounds, because he's forced. You want to be forced.
Well, no. Here's the deal. Think about it. If the person is your friend, if it's really your friend, not I have a black friend, but if they're really your friend,
right,
then calling them is no big deal, because you call your friends.
Right.
What are you doing tomorrow? You say that to your friends. Right. See, that's the thing. When people say, I have a black friend, do you really? How much of a friend?
Really?
Yeah. How much of a friend is it really?
Right.
If doing something with them that you enjoy is odd, I would say they're not your friend.
Right. I'll never forget my one of the first years in the General Assembly. My seatmate was Algie Howe from Norfolk, and he's an older gentleman and wasn't used to working with computers. And I was helping him and understand his laptop and the voting system, because it goes very quickly, as you know, in the General Assembly. It was his first day, and he was a little flustered. And I was showing him the ropes, so to speak. We had a break in the action, and a bunch of the legislators were milling about. And I always made sure to sit with the Democrats, to your point, to sit with someone different than you so you can understand them. And he said, hey, meet, telling his Democratic friends, hey, meet my friend Chris here. And they kind of leaned in when they whispered to him, he's not a Democrat. And Algie whips around. He goes, I have a lot of Republican friends back home too. I said, what is this, the early 70s? It felt so, but everyone has that moment though, right? It's like, are we really friends?
Right.
Do you qualify that? Friends don't.
Yeah. And so for Steve, Steve Case, and I said my first roommate at Virginia Tech, white guy, sometimes I even forget about the whole white part, and I suspect sometimes he forgets the black part, because we'll get on the phone and we're not talking about white or black. We're saying, how you doing? What are you up to? If he's passing through Richmond, hey, want to get together and have lunch? Or I want to run this by you. And that's what friends do. And I think when you have more of those conversations, then you feel comfortable if there's something that you're not feeling comfortable about, right, and sharing it. I think that's what friends do for each other. And so plus, life is short, Chris, and I don't want us to always have this friction. So we're, okay, here comes we got to have this conversation about this topic or that topic. It's going to be painful. I'm going to be sad. I'm going to cry. No, that's not what it's about. It's not about blaming. It's not about, you have to do that. No, it's about, for me, where do we want our country to go for our children and our children's children and our children's children's children? And I think we have an opportunity to shape that. And people with good sense know that we have to figure out how to do it together, because we're stronger together. We're better as an America. I love our country. And at the end of the day, we need more love. We want to have a little fun in this thing. And I'm enjoying my second act. I'm enjoying my retirement. I like making these movies. And I love getting to do it with people that I care about. And we deliberately have interracial teams, intergenerational teams. We try to teach the young people coming up how to do the art, but how to do it from this perspective, through this achievement lens, because we recognize the power of it. Most people don't know that, or maybe they do, but whenever you look at the human story, most of the great things in the world were done by a diverse set of people. The big things, man on the moon, all that stuff. You can always find a diverse set of people. And it's pretty extraordinary. And so I think we owe it to ourselves to engage the best of everybody else. And I want to live in that world.
That's probably a great sentiment to conclude. Hopefully our first episode and our first shot of this. I know you're busy. Laura Bateman sends a shout out from the peninsula. She asked, how do you sleep? When do you sleep? Do you sleep? You're a very active man. I can't thank you enough for being here, first of all, and also doing what you do. You work in some pretty interesting circles, and it's extraordinary to see someone of your talent, expertise, and drive want to tell a happy story, the story that American, and I love the way you frame it for the good of our country, the good of our children. And I think that whole construct I think it comes from your faith. We've talked about that. And I think you're stitching together a story for the fabric of America that I think will be of great benefit to us all. And especially at this time when we're in a moment, and I don't want to lose it. And I don't think you want to either. So BK Fulton, founding chairman, CEO of Soulidifly Productions. I wish you and your lovely bride, Jackie, the very best today and tomorrow, and have a great weekend. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.